Have you ever witnessed a moment so intense, so uncomfortable, that an entire room froze? Because that's exactly what happened the day Aurora's voice cracked, and Kody Brown snapped into a version of himself we've never seen before. This wasn't normal fatherly concern. Instinct, panic, fear, and guilt erupted all at once. The second Aurora shook, Kody didn't walk. He lunged, placing himself between her and the world like a human shield. His face tightened, his posture locked. And the wives? They didn't see love. They saw possession. Why did this moment hit him so hard? Why did this one question get him to react that way, protecting this last bit of his identity? Because Kody wasn't shielding Aurora from the family. He was shielding himself from each failure, every lost child, every broken marriage which haunts him. And that's where the story gets dark. Because the wives realized something chilling. Kody's most basic instinct is to protect his family. Yet, it's to protect the one part of his world that hasn't walked away. Today, we break down the moment that exposed the deepest cracks in the Brown family, and why this single reaction changed everything. Where usually Aurora was quieter than most, her morning demeanor had been even more subdued. There was a fragility in the way she moved, even before cameras rolled, slow, calculated, as one would to avoid drawing attention. Aurora usually kept with her a soft, anxious energy, but it felt heavier today. She dug her eyes into the floor and fumbled her fingers, breathing unevenly, as if preparing herself for something she was scared of. The production crew sensed it too. They exchanged a few quick glances, but didn't intervene. They'd spent enough time filming the Browns by now to know when something was simmering beneath the surface, when the tension was internal, emotional, and just waiting for the tiniest spark to erupt. By the time cameras officially started rolling, the family was seated in the living room. Christine, Janelle, and Mary sat side by side, each bringing her silent interpretation of the mood. Meanwhile, Robyn kept close to Aurora, who hovered almost protectively, yet still gave her space. Kody paced slowly near the doorway, his expression unreadable, arms folded tightly across his chest. The conversation started innocently enough, small questions about how everybody was doing, how things were going on Coyote Pass, the same safe topics the show often opened with. But then the question came outwardly simple and innocent, yet painfully sharp to Aurora. Someone asked her about an old emotional subject with which she had previously struggled. It was a topic that made her voice shake, her chest tighten, and anxiety rise like a wave. Aurora froze. Her eyes went wide, her lips shaking slightly, her hands locking into each other as if trying to hold herself together. For a split second, there was an uncomfortable silence, and then it happened fast, sudden, almost instinctive. Kody moved. Not just moved, he lunged forward. Not in aggression, but in pure, raw panic. His face hardened, and the muscles of his jaw clenched so sharply that Christine straightened up unconsciously. And in an instant, he had changed his posture. He moved to stand between Aurora and the rest of them, like a human barricade. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't the soft concern of a father checking on his daughter. It was a deep, primal, almost defensive reaction. His whole body became a shield. Aurora's gaze snapped up in surprise as Kody filled the room, the space he took up. Even Robyn, who was closest to her, stepped back, startled by the suddenness and swiftness of the movement. But there was one moment less than a second that told it all. A moment that said, Kody wasn't reacting to Aurora. He was reacting to the fear inside himself. The wives exchanged looks behind his back, meaningful, silent communications. Christine's eyebrows furrowed together as if she was watching something she had seen before, just not this clearly. Janelle looked down for a second and blew out a disbelieving breath. Even Mary, so often impassive and expressionless in moments of high tension, blinked slowly, processing the shift in mood that had just occurred in the room. No one had ever seen Kody move this fast, this urgently, or this fiercely, especially over Aurora. "Are you okay? You don't have to talk about anything you're not ready for," Kody said, his voice tight, his words rushed and protective. But there was something else under his tone, fear. A fear that didn't belong to Aurora, a fear that belonged to him. The cameras kept rolling. The crew froze. The room felt smaller. Aurora's breathing quickened, but she nodded softly, as if to reassure her father more than herself. Robyn moved closer, laying a soothing hand on her daughter's arm, whispering something calming, but even she seemed taken aback by Kody's reaction. Christine leaned slightly to Janelle and whispered, "What was that?" Janelle didn't reply. She just stared at Kody, who hovered protectively, his body stiff. his eyes scanning as though he expected more questions to attack them. The energy had shifted completely. The moment was no longer about Aurora only. It was about Kody, about his instinct, about his emotional trigger, and everyone in the room felt it, even Aurora. Her anxiety didn't lessen, not yet. If anything, the sight of her father reacting so intensely made her shoulders tense further. She wasn't asking for protection. She wasn't in danger. She wasn't being attacked. Yet her father behaved like she was seconds away from breaking. This wasn't normal concern. This was fear masquerading as love, control masquerading as comfort. And immediately the wives knew it. Christine muttered under her breath, "He's doing it again." Mary's eyes softened for a moment. Janelle crossed her arms. Kody didn't look at any of them. He didn't acknowledge their reaction. He was completely focused on Aurora, almost obsessively. In that instant, one thing became crystal clear. Kody Brown wasn't just being a father. He was being a barrier. A wall built out of guilt, panic, and unresolved wound. And in that second, the emotional tremor ran across the room, through wives, crew, and even Aurora. This wasn't the start of a conversation. This was the beginning of something breaking. The room didn't just fall silent. It collapsed into silence. A thick, uncomfortable stillness spread through the space, like someone had pulled all the sound out of the air. No one was breathing normally anymore. No one moved. No one even blinked on rhythm with anyone else. It was as if the whole family had been caught in a moment they weren't ever supposed to see. Christine was the first to react, but only a little. She blinked twice, slowly, her eyebrows pulled in towards the center with shock and disbelief, as though her mind echoed, "Did he really just do that?" Her posture in her seat changed. She sat back a bit, space between her and that moment, like someone stepping away from a fire they didn't expect to flare up. Janelle kept her eyes low, staring at the floor as if it suddenly held the answer to a question she didn't want to ask out loud. She pressed her lips together tightly, her classic silent way of saying she didn't agree but didn't want to spark a fight either. Her fingers tapped lightly against her thigh. It wasn't impatience, it was processing, because Kody's reaction wasn't normal father worry. It was something sharper, something deeper. Even Mary, who had mastered the art of emotional poker face, seemed shaken. Her eyes widened just a fraction. But in this family, even that was a loud reaction. Rarely did emotions slip out of Mary, especially when Kody was involved. But this? The moment cut through her practiced calm like a blade. Robyn reached out and laid a hand on Aurora's shoulder. Soft, warm, calming, the kind of touch a mother gives, not to fix the situation, but to remind her child she isn't alone. Aurora nodded slightly, wordless, still nervous, trying to breathe, trying not to buckle under the pressure in the room. But even Robyn could feel it. The silence wasn't about Aurora anymore. It was about Kody. And Kody. Kody stood there, so still, a statue carved out of tension itself, his jaw clenched, his shoulders pulled tight. His eyes scanned the room with a kind of defensive alertness, as if he expected someone, anyone, to challenge him. He wasn't just standing near Aurora, he was hovering over her, guarding her in a way that looked less like protection and more like possession. His body language didn't say, "Are you okay?" It said, "Don't come near her." And that message was loud, too loud. Christine felt it. Janelle felt it. Mary felt it. Even the production crew, trying to pretend they didn't exist, felt the thick electricity in the air. This wasn't the first time they'd seen Kody lose his cool or lean too heavily into emotion, but this moment was different. It carried weight. It carried history. It carried something unspoken, something the entire family had tiptoed around for years but had never seen explode so visibly. The wives didn't know whether to move forward to comfort Aurora, or to step back to avoid triggering Kody even more. That's how tense the room had become. She sat stiffly, trying not to look small, trying not to look frightened, but the pressure around her was impossible to ignore. She felt her mother's hand on her shoulder, but she also felt her father's tension standing over her like a shadow she could not escape. Christine glanced at Janelle, as if to say, silently, for some backup. Janelle glanced up briefly, her expression saying, "Just don't start something now." Mary's eyes flickered from Kody, then to Aurora, not sure which needed her attention more. Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Because whatever Kody was feeling, it wasn't mild, it wasn't gentle, it wasn't something anyone wanted to poke. The silence started to stretch longer, heavier, almost suffocating. They sat, paralyzed, between trying to defuse the situation and fearing they might escalate it by simply acknowledging it. This wasn't the first fracture they'd seen in the dynamic of the family, but it was among the first times they could feel the crack forming in real time. Like watching glass break in slow motion. It was quiet, but devastating. Finally, Robyn whispered something softly into Aurora's ear, but her voice was so low that even the cameras couldn't catch it. It wasn't meant for the family, rather a way to get Aurora through the moment. Kody didn't move, not an inch. His presence dominated the room, like a storm cloud too heavy to burst. If anyone had tried to speak, it would have felt like shouting into thunder. One thought began to settle into everybody's mind. This family wasn't just drifting apart. It was splitting quietly, painfully, right in front of their eyes. It was not just silence. It was a confession. A confession that something was deeply wrong. Nobody knew how to resolve the problem. What set off Kody wasn't simple. It was never easy with him, never straightforward. Something inside him stirred at the very moment his eyes met Aurora's discomfort. Not in the way a father simply notices his child struggling, but in a manner that seemed like an old wound had been torn open. Aurora's trembling voice didn't just alert him, it activated him. For one instant, Kody wasn't in a room with his family. He stood in the middle of all his past failures, the conversations that ended in tears, the relationships that slipped from his hands, the children who grew distant, the wives who walked away, the love he couldn't hold, and the guilt he'd fought so desperately to bury came flooding right back. To the outside world, Kody Brown is loud, fiery, dramatic. But inside, he is fighting a battle he rarely admits. The fear of losing control of the people he claims to love. And Aurora's fear triggered his fear. Not fear for her, but fear from her. Whenever Aurora breaks down or struggles emotionally, Kody sees something that no one else in the family sees. He sees a reflection of himself, his guilt, his regrets, his emotional blind spots, the moments he did not show up for his children in the past. He sees the version of himself that he desperately tries to hide. And the moment Aurora froze, all of that resurfaced. Kody always has carried guilt, especially when it comes to his older kids. Many walked away emotionally long before they walked away physically. Many stopped trusting him long before the separations became official. He wasted time with them. He lost contact with them. He lost authority over them. And deep down, he knows that he contributed to that loss. So when Robyn's kids, particularly Aurora, show emotional vulnerability, Kody doesn't see it as just normal stress. He construes it as a warning, a sign, a fear echoing in his mind. What if I lose this child too? A fear that bites him harder than he ever admits. It is because, in his mind, losing Robyn's children would mean losing the last family that still fully stands with him. And Kody's biggest fear in life is that he'll end up with nothing. No wife's loyalty, no children trusting him, no family identity, no control. She wasn't shaking because of Aurora. Kody's desperation was. Sister Wives viewers have watched Kody break down, scream, and emotionally unravel, but usually when the topic involves Robyn's children, custody, emotional loyalty, the collapse of plural marriage, being left behind. And while many have sympathized at times, the pattern is hard to miss. When something threatens his relationship with Robyn's children, Kody becomes a different man. His voice changes, his posture changes, his emotions spike. But this moment with Aurora felt different, deeper, raw, more exposed. Because it wasn't about the question that was asked. It wasn't about the topic of conversation. It was about everything Kody believes he has already lost, and everything he's terrified of losing next. He wasn't protecting Aurora from the family. From the outside, it looked like fatherly instinct. But it wasn't that simple. Kody wasn't positioning himself as a shield to defend Aurora. From Christine, from Janelle, from Mary, or from the cameras. He was defending himself from his own emotional memories. He was protecting the image of himself he clings to, the image of a father who is still occupying a place in someone's heart. Because if Aurora breaks, by keeping her distance, if she slips away the way so many others already have, then Kody loses the last thread of emotional power which he thinks he still possesses. The moment Aurora struggled, Kody saw abandonment, not from her, but from his past coming true again. What made the wives uncomfortable wasn't just the intensity, it was the panic hiding beneath it. Kody wasn't calm, he wasn't steady, he wasn't thinking clearly. His reaction was like a man cornered by his own history, a man terrified that the last remaining pieces of his family, Robyn, Aurora, and the youngest ones, are the only ones who haven't labeled him the villain yet. So when Aurora trembled, Kody didn't just see her fear, He saw the future he dreads, a life in which no child ever again looks at him with trust. His sudden protectiveness was not an act of love. It was an act of fear, of desperation, of a man who tried to keep one piece of his fractured world from collapsing. And that is what made the moment so heavy, so intense, so unmistakably revealing. Kody wasn't responding to Aurora. He was reacting to himself, to the emotional chaos he refuses to face. The wives knew it. The cameras caught it. Aurora felt it. And Kody tried to bury it. But by then, the truth had already surfaced. By evening, the tension that had quietly poisoned the air all day could no longer be ignored. People had tried to go through the motions, dinner, small talk, the usual routines that families cling to when they're trying not to implode. But it was pointless. The weight of what happened earlier followed them from room to room like a shadow. When the cameras turned back on for the evening segment, the family sat in a wide circle. No one looked comfortable. No one looked ready. But everyone knew the moment had come. Christine spoke first, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, calm, deliberate, the tone she used when she knew the truth might explode, but she still had to speak it. "Kody," she began carefully. "What happened earlier? It scared everyone, including Aurora." The room tightened instantly. Robyn's face snapped up. Kody's eyes narrow-wed. Aurora shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Christine wasn't attacking, but she wasn't sugarcoating either. She had seen Kody behave emotionally before, but the intensity of today felt different. It felt volatile. Before Christine could complete her thought, Robyn interrupted her. "He was just being a good father," she said sharply, her eyes already shining with defensive tears. "Aurora was overwhelmed. He stepped in because he cares." Robyn always cried before she argued. Not because she was weak, but because emotion reached her faster than words. She was loyal to Kody, especially when it involved her children. Janelle released a slow breath, not in annoyance, but in exhaustion. "That's not what I saw, Robyn," she said in a firm, mature voice. "There's a big difference between helping someone and hovering over them like they're about to collapse." It felt controlling, not caring. Kody's head snapped towards her. "I was not controlling," he fired back, his tone rising immediately. "I was protecting my daughter. She is under too much pressure." Everybody stared at him. Pressure from whom? From what? From them? From the cameras? From the situation? Nobody knew what he was talking about, not even Aurora, who cast her gaze down at her hands. "Kody," Christine said softly, "no one was attacking her. No one was pressuring her. We were all just talking." "You don't get it, Christine!" he exploded. "You never get it when it comes to Robyn's kids!" And there it was, the accusation that always surfaced when Kody felt cornered. Robyn's lips quivered. Christine swallowed hard. Janelle leaned back, shutting her eyes briefly. Mary sat there, as quiet as ever, her expression speaking volumes on the repetitive pattern she had perhaps watched throughout. "You make everything about us not liking Robyn's kids," Janelle said, her voice firm. "When the truth is you treat them differently. You react different. You protect them in ways you never protected ours." The words had hit the room like a bomb. Robyn immediately shook her head in distress. "That's not fair." "It's true," Christine cut in, more calmly but with undeniable emotion. "And today proved it. That level of panic? That wasn't about Aurora. That was about you." Kody stood up now, pacing like a man trapped between anger and fear. "You guys don't understand the pressure she's under," he said again, this time louder. "She's dealing with things you don't see, things I'm not going to share on camera." "Then why react like you did?" Janelle asked. "Why shut all of us out in the process?" Kody stopped pacing, placing his hands on his hips. "Because I am done letting this family tear apart the people who actually stay loyal to me," he said, voice shaking with emotion. Robyn covered her mouth with her hand, stuck between defending him and absorbing the weight of his words. Christine stared, seemingly in shock. Mary looked down. She clenched her jaw. To the wives, this was not merely a statement. It was a confession. A confession that Kody's world had grown achingly small, and they were no longer part of it. "You're pushing us out," Christine whispered. Kody didn't say a word. His silence spoke volumes. "We don't get access to you anymore," Janelle said. "We don't get partnership. We don't get input. We just get whatever's left after Robyn's family." Robyn's eyes welled up with tears, defensive, wounded, vulnerable all at once. "That's not true," she tried to say, but her voice cracked. "It feels true," Mary said quietly, a surprise to anyone, because she rarely weighed in. "It has felt true for a long time." It had become bigger than Kody's reaction earlier. It had become a mirror. It reflected every fracture, every resentment, and every piece of denial the family had buried. And for the first time, Kody didn't try to repair it. He didn't try to fix the narrative. He didn't even try to comfort Robyn. He just stood there, panting heavily, looking around at the family he used to lead, and realized that no one stood with him. Not really. The confrontation didn't solve anything. It only exposed how deeply divided the Brown family had become, and how impossible it was to go back. By the next morning, the house was unnaturally quiet, not peaceful, just heavy. The kind of silence that doesn't heal anything but reminds everyone that something broke the night before. The emotional shock still hung in the air like dust after an explosion. While calmer than she'd been last evening, Aurora carried a softness in her eyes that spoke volumes of tiredness from holding back her tears too long. She sat at the table with her hands wrapped around a warm cup for comfort, not drinking it, and then would glance toward the hallway every now and then, almost as if expecting the tension to come walking right back in. Robyn hovered close, watching her daughter with the protective instinct of a mother, gentle, patient, ever prepared to shield her. But not even Robyn could conceal the discomfort that seemed to linger. Her eyes betrayed turmoil she tried to push aside. Kody approached the room much more cautiously than the day before, his steps softer, his body language less explosive. He wasn't the shield, the wall, or the barrier today. He was a man trying to undo the impression he'd managed to make. He sat down opposite Aurora and began to speak in a near-apologetic tone of voice. I just reacted out of instinct, he said more quietly than usual. I wasn't trying to scare anyone. I saw you panicking, and I didn't want you to go through that alone. The explanation hung in the air, hollow and incomplete. Robyn put her hand on his arm at once, nodding. That's what a father does, she said softly. He protects. People can misunderstand it, but it comes from love. Aurora nodded slowly, without fully looking in his direction. She knew his intention, but the moment's intensity still lingered, like how he charged forward. The room stood still, and people acted as though something dangerous had suddenly come into the room. Kody's explanation didn't wash that memory clean. Christine was next, quiet and observant. Her eyes flicked to Kody, then to Aurora. Janelle followed not far behind. Her face was still, even unreadable. Mary came last, her energy detached yet aware, like someone who has watched the same movie too many times to feign surprise over the ending. No one pushed the conversation. None of them wanted another confrontation. But the silence carried questions none of them could ignore. Finally, it was Christine who broke it. We're glad Aurora is okay, she started off gently. But yesterday, it was a lot. For all of us. Kody bristled, feeling where this would be headed. Robyn sat forward in her chair at once, ready to defend him again. Janelle added quietly, Your reaction, Kody, it didn't feel equal. We have all had kids go through emotional moments. But you have never reacted like that with any of ours. The words hit harder than anyone expected. Mary nodded slightly, a silent agreement, one she hadn't voiced in years. Kody let out a sigh and ran his hands over his face. I was trying to help, he insisted. She was under too much pressure. But from whom? Christine asked softly. From us? From herself? Or from you? He didn't answer, because he didn't know. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was revealing. It was the kind of silence that comes when everyone realizes they've reached the edge of something that can't be easily repaired. Robyn looked around the room, desperation in her eyes, not for validation but for understanding. She wanted the family to see Kody the way she saw him, a man trying, struggling, protecting. But the other wives saw something else entirely. They saw selective love, selective effort, selective protection. And selective love is often the most painful kind. But the incident seemed to create a lingering crack in the foundation of this family, one that wasn't loud or dramatic, just deep and undeniable. Why did Kody react so strongly? Why only to Aurora? Why did it feel like the room was divided into two families rather than one? The questions did not go away. They developed roots. As the wives walked away from the kitchen, one thing became painfully clear. Kody's protective instinct had exposed more than a moment of fatherly concern. It had unraveled the truth that everybody had been trying to avoid, that the Brown family wasn't just separated. It was splintered. And some fractures don't heal. They just end up being permanent lines between people who used to share the same home, the same dream, the same name.